Hello everybody and welcome back to 89 Games in our continuing Gloomhaven character guide series. Today we will be talking about the Angry Face class. So if you haven't played the game and you don't want any spoilers, here's your chance to turn away, but for everybody else, we're going to get started here in 3, 2, 1, here we go. Alright guys, today we're talking about the Doomstalker. Now the Doomstalker is an very interesting class. He plays very differently from a lot of characters because of his dooms and that mechanic built around that. So we'll talk about that as we get into the cards. So let's go ahead and do that right now, starting with the level 1s. And we'll talk about the doom as we go here. So the first card is Rain of Arrows. The next 4 times a doomed enemy dies, you perform an attack 2 range 5 action. So to understand what that means, let's go ahead and talk about the doom on the bottom of this card. Doom. Mark any one enemy as doomed. Add +2 attack to all your attacks targeting this enemy. And then when the enemy dies or another doom is played, you discard this card. So dooms are not lost cards. You play them, and then once they're used or you decide to deactivate them, they just go into your discard. You get them back on a rest. So it's really nice because you can reuse them. And then essentially what the top of this card is saying is that if you have marked an enemy with a doom, then the next 4 times that one of those enemies that's marked dies, you get to perform a free attack essentially at range 5 for 2. So that's not bad, but it can be wasted because if an enemy isn't in range 5 of you for some reason, then you won't get to do this. However, with range 5, you probably will have an enemy within that range most of the time. And then this bottom doom, adding that +2 attack to all your attacks targeting the enemy, that's really good for you to focus down one enemy and get that extra 2 attack every time you hit them. And as we build the character, I'm really going to go for more of a single target, focus down kind of build, although some of the cards will also help our allies to do that same thing. There are a lot of different ways you could potentially build a Doomstalker, and we'll talk about a few of those as we go. So anyway, let's go ahead and move on to the next card here, which is Crippling Noose. And you will notice that most of these cards, especially at level 1, and a lot of cards moving on, will be dooms on the bottom. So the one big thing that the Doomstalker has disadvantage in is movement. And it's not that he doesn't necessarily have a handful of good move cards to help him catch up with people. It's that when you're playing your dooms, you won't be moving. So you will be sitting kind of in the back of a scenario for quite a while before taking maybe a turn to move up and then sitting there again for a while. So you're not a very mobile character, but you do have a lot of range. And of course, the dooms, which can be put on anybody as long as you have line of sight. So, Crippling Noose, it creates 1 4 damage stun trap and adjacent empty hex. You gain 2 XP when it's sprung by an enemy. That is a burn. So as a trap card in a burn, I don't like it because it's too hard to make sure you actually get the use out of this. Unless you're working with a team that's got a lot of pushes and pulls and can make sure this trap gets used, this could get wasted because enemies are going to try to avoid it if at all possible. And then the bottom doom here is this enemy's attack, move, and range are all reduced by 1. So that's a really good debuff for an enemy, especially a powerful one. And we'll see a card later that we can pair with this that kind of makes sense. And then moving on to Felling Swoop. So here's our first summons. So this is another way that you could play the Doomstalker. He does have quite a few summons. So if you wanted to play him as a summoner, you definitely could. But again, Gloomhaven summons are usually very lackluster, underpowered. They die too quickly. So I don't recommend doing that. However, this one has health 3, move 3, and attack 3. So it would definitely keep up and do some decent damage. But the problem is with only 3 health, it's going to get hit once and die most likely, and you can't get this card back. And then the bottom of this one, when this enemy dies, it's a doom. When this enemy dies, move to the hex in which it died. So I like the bottom of this one for one reason, and so that's what we just talked about, how the Doomstalker doesn't move a whole lot. This card can help you just basically teleport up to where everyone else is when an enemy up there that's doomed dies. So this is a good way to get some free movement when you really need it, when you're falling behind. But otherwise, this card is skippable. And then the next one is Vital Charge. Again, it's a summons on top, and it has 7 health, 3 movement, and 1 attack power. And then the bottom of this one is a doom that allows you to heal 4 when an enemy dies, when the enemy that's doomed dies. So again, I don't like this card too well either. It's another one I would probably skip because as a Doomstalker, you really shouldn't be taking too much damage because you're going to be in the back doing damage from range using your Dooms. So this heal 4 is probably not necessary, especially when you could do the same thing with a healing potion. Granted, this one could be reused later, but unless you're finding yourself take a lot of damage, it really doesn't make sense to bring this card with you. And then moving on to Race to the Grave. This one has attack 5 and range 5 with 2 XP, and it burns. But as a burn card, this one's not actually bad, especially at level 1 and 2 when enemies have a lot less health. This could kill an enemy, so it could be worth the burn, saving your teammates' turns. And plus, you do have 12 cards as your hand size as the Doomstalker, meaning you can afford to play, 2-3 burns and be okay. And then the bottom of this one is another Doom, and this one makes an enemy suffer 2 damage at the start of each of its turns. So I really do like this Doom. It's one I use a lot. It's especially good for dooming an enemy that's kind of in the back that you guys aren't attacking right now, and it can slowly suffer damage and maybe die before you ever get to it, or when you do get to it, its health will be so low that it'll be really easy to take out. So this one's really good for just whittling down an enemy, especially shielded enemies who don't have a whole lot of health. This is a really good way to kill them really quickly without having to actually attack them. And then also the initiative on this one is really nice. It's one of our lowest initiatives that'll help us to go early when we need to. And then talking about low initiative, the next one is another decent initiative. This one is multi-pronged assault. It's attack 4, range 3, and target 2. You gain 2 XP. It burns. So again, another decent burn attack because it's attack 4 on 2 targets with range 3. In the right situation, this one makes sense to use, but you wouldn't want to use it on weak enemies with only like 1 health left. You'd want to use it on something a little bit stronger. Make sure you get your maximum use out of this if you're going to burn it. And then the bottom is another Doom that all allies add +1 attack to all their attacks targeting the doomed enemy. So this one is really good for kind of the opposite of what we talked about with Race to the Grave's Doom, where you want to put it on an enemy that's like in the back, you're not hitting right now. This one you want to put on the enemy in the front that everybody's targeting. Because if all your allies, if you have a full party, you've got 3 allies out there, that's +3 attack, at least if they all attack, maybe more if they're doing multiple attacks. So this one's really good, again, for focusing down one enemy and getting rid of them really quickly. And then the next card is Detonation. Create 1 3 damage trap in an adjacent empty hex. All enemies adjacent to the trap, when it gets sprung, suffer 2 damage, and you gain 2 XP if it was sprung by an enemy, and then it burns. So again, we're going with a burn trap here. I don't like it, and plus, I mean, getting the extra damage from adjacent enemies out of it, like the odds of it going off when there are enemies near it is just too high for this to be useful in any kind of consistent manner. And then the bottom of this one is a Doom where when the doomed enemy dies, all enemies adjacent to the hex in which it died suffer 3 damage. And again, this is one that would be hard to really get your maximum benefit out of it and could be completely wasted if the enemy dies and there's no one adjacent to him. So I don't really like Detonation. I think it's too difficult to use, too much of a risk for not a lot of reward in most cases. The next one is Frightening Curse. The next 3 times a doomed enemy dies within range 2 of another enemy, transfer 1 Doom to that enemy instead of discarding it. And then this one burns. However, I do really like this because it allows us to reuse a Doom, especially one of our favorites like the Add Attack. As long as there's another enemy within range 2, it allows us to go ahead and transfer that Doom without having to lose it, to discard it, and wait for a rest. So it keeps that card out there. Also, this doesn't get used if an enemy isn't within 2. Like, if that condition is not true, then you get to keep this, so these charges won't get wasted. So this is actually a pretty good active card for keeping a Doom out there without having to wait until a rest to replay it. And then the bottom of this one is another Doom, where when this enemy dies, you force all enemies adjacent to it perform move 1 with you controlling the actions. That is what it is. I really don't like those because they're generally not that useful. But the top of this one definitely is useful. And then moving on to the next one with Foot Snare. Create 1 2 damage immobilize trap in an adjacent empty hex. And then the bottom, immobilize, target 1 adjacent enemy, move 3. I do like this card because the top is not a burn trap, and traps can be very good for battlefield control, controlling the enemies where they move, and blocking off areas. So I do like this one. Plus, with an immobilized trap, when the enemy moves over it, their movement will be halted. So this is a decent little control card. And then the next one, solid bow. We finally get to our first actual, real, reusable, not a burn attack. And you will be using solid bow a lot, especially in the beginning, because one of the few attack cards that we actually have as the Doomstalker. So attack 3 at range 5 is a very, very strong range attack. And then the bottom is a move 4 for some good mobility. This is just a good all-around card. And then a moment's peace is the next one with a top loot 1, which makes it a lot more useful than a lot of loot cards because it's on top, which means we can move and then loot something. And then the bottom is a move 2, heal 2 on the self. So I do like to keep this one around just for that heal 2 on the bottom, because it's useful to be able to move 2 and then also heal ourselves for 2. In that case that we do take damage, at least we can give ourselves a little bit of healing, stay in the fight. And then the last one of the level 1 cards is Swift Trickery. It's another attack card with attack 2, range 4, and you add +2 attack if you're targeting the doomed enemy. So this one, again, is really good if, say, we're using multi-pronged assaults doom. So we're adding +1 attack to all our allies' attacks targeting that enemy. Then we target that same doomed enemy, and we're going to be getting an extra, 2 attack on this to make it attack 4 at range 4. It's pretty decent, plus the XP, and the bottom is a nice move 5. And then we get into the X cards. So the first one is Retaliate 3 at range 4. It's a burn, so it only lasts for the round. So Retaliate 3 at range 4 sounds really good, but because this is a burn, and because you shouldn't really be taking a lot of hits as a Doomstalker, and since you don't have tank health either, you have like the middle health, you really shouldn't be taking a whole lot of hits. So I feel like this Retaliate isn't really that great. And then the bottom is a Doom, which each time this enemy suffers damage, you perform a heal 2 action on yourself. Again, you're not going to be taking a lot of damage as the Doomstalker. You really shouldn't be, the way he plays. I mean, if you're playing the Summoner role, you shouldn't be taking damage. If you're playing the ranged single target rule, like I'm going to be doing, then you shouldn't be taking damage. And then moving on to the Hunt Begins. This is another summons with the Vicious Jackal. He has health 5, move 2, attack 1, retaliate 1, and wound on his attacks. But again, with health 5, he's probably going to die too quickly to be that useful. And then the bottom is another Doom, which this would be the Doom you'd want if you're playing the Summoner role, because it gives all your summons +2 attacks on the doomed enemy. So, if all your summons are surrounding an enemy, you could Doom that one. It'd be doing a lot of damage, take him down really quickly, but that only really applies if you're doing the Summoner role. And then finally, the last one of these is Fresh Kill, another attack 2, range 4, but you add +2 and gain 1 XP if the target is undamaged, which I do like this one. It's mostly because it's another attack that we have early on, but also, target those undamaged enemies, get that extra 2 attack out of it. It's pretty useful. And then the bottom is a move 3 with Jump, which is really good for our mobility. It's nice to have at least one card with Jump so we don't get stuck behind obstacles or whatever the case may be. All right, so there's level 1. Now, at level 1, the only card change I would make I want to put Fresh Kill in. I'm going to take out Detonation because we talked how difficult that would be to really make effective. And we'll put Fresh Kill in so we have another actual attack. So you'll see at level 1, we only have 1, 2, and 3 reusable actual attacks. Everything else is a Doom or a Summons or a Burn. We are really kind of underpowered, and it's very slow going at early levels with the Doomstalker. But later on, you get to level 5, he starts to get a lot more useful and a lot more interesting. So let's go ahead and move on to level 2 and look at those cards, which we'll find Expose and Relentless Offensive. So Expose, you gain advantage on 1 attack each turn targeting a doomed enemy. All enemies lose Invisible and may no longer gain Invisible. And then this is an active card, does burn. And then the bottom is a Doom. You and all allies gain Pierce 2 on all your attacks targeting this enemy. And then the other one is Relentless Offensive with an attack 2, range 5, target 2. And then the bottom is add +2 attack to all your attacks targeting doomed enemies this round. Out of these two, they're both decent. Relentless Offensive because it does give us another attack, which is nice. But Expose I really like because, so first of all, we gain advantage when we target our doomed enemy, which is really nice. That's going to give us advantage for multiple turns in a row until that enemy is dead. And then the bottom part of that top, though, that second part of the top, all enemies lose Invisible and may no longer gain Invisible. That, on certain scenarios where you have those enemies like Night Demons that can go invisible, that is amazing to make them not be able to go invisible. That can help you so much. Now, it is kind of a niche use, I admit, but it's a really powerful one when that situation occurs. Plus, the top of this still gives you advantage on that doomed enemy, which is really nice. And then the bottom is super useful for shielded enemies because it gives you and all your allies Pierce 2. So I really like this one, especially for handling shielded enemies. So we're going to take Expose, and then we're going to trade out Vital Charge to put Expose in. And then let's move on to level 3, where we'll find Darkened Skies and press the attack. So Darkened Skies, attack 3, targets all enemies within range 3, and you gain 1 XP for every 2 enemies targeted. And then this one burns. So, it's attack 3 on everything within range 3. So it's kind of a room killer, but it still only is an attack 3 and it burns. However, with a power potion, advantage, and different things, this could be a really, really powerful room wipe kind of card. And then the bottom is another Doom. When this enemy dies, perform an attack 2, range 3, target 3 action. That's actually really, really nice little Doom there, because as the enemy dies, attack 3, range 3 on 3 targets. The only problem is the range 3, and depending on where we are, we may not get to use this to its fullest extent. And then press the attack is the other one. This is an attack 2, range 4, and you add 3 and gain XP if it's the target that's doomed. And then the bottom is a retaliate 2 at range 2. So out of these cards, Darkened Skies, that top is a really good one, but press the attack is good reusable attack that could be probably an attack 5 most of the time because you'd be using on a doomed enemy. So really, you couldn't be faulted for taking either card here. And I think I'm going to take Darkened Skies just because properly powered up, this attack 3 on everything within range 3 is really powerful. I'm talking like a super power potion or major power potion. That's +2 attack. Do it with Eagle Eye Goggles with advantage. That could be really powerful. So we're actually going to take Darkened Skies here. And then we're going to take out Crippling Noose to put that one in. And then we'll move on to level 4. And at level 4, we'll find Singular Focus and Flight of the Flame. Or Flight of Flame. So, Singular Focus. Loot 2, XP 2, and Burn. So, I don't know if I really want to use a loot card as a burn. So, not too great on the top there. The bottom is another Doom that you and all allies gain advantage on all your attacks targeting this enemy. So, that is really, really good because now we're getting advantage, which is better than the +1 attack because now we're never going to miss and probably do, on average, more damage than we did with the +1. And then Flight of Flame, create 1/2 damage wound trap and an adjacent empty hex, wound all enemies adjacent to it when the trap is sprung. The bottom is a really nice move 5 with jump. So again, I do like this trap card because it's reusable. If you're trying to play kind of a control build with a Doomstalker, then this trap would be a really good idea to kind of, again, control enemy movement and things like that. However, I'm going to go with Singular Focus because of the Doom on the bottom. Giving my allies advantage is just really, really powerful. And me too, on that doomed enemy. So we're going to take Singular Focus. And then we're going to take out Felling Swoop to add that one in. Now, if you do find yourself falling behind a lot and you've been using this to teleport, you may want to leave it in, but you should be okay without it. So then we'll go ahead and move on to level 5, where we find Inescapable Fate and Wild Command. So Inescapable Fate. You may have 2 Dooms active on the same target. If the third Doom is played on the target, you discard one of the others, or if the third Doom is played on a different target, you have to discard both. So this essentially allows you to Doom twice on one target, but one target only. However, this allows you to create some pretty interesting combinations of Dooms on those targets. And of course, this is an active card. It burns if you ever discard it. And then the bottom is another Doom. At the start of the next 3 turns, advance a tracker on this effect. After it advances 3 times, kill the target and discard this card. And now this works on any normal or elite enemy. So it takes 3 turns, actually 4, because on the first turn you actually set this up, and then 3 turns later, these trackers move, and then once it does reach the last one, that target actually just dies. So this is really good for those really tough elite enemies. Again, one that's maybe in the back that you're not going to get to. Although I will say that depending on your party, sometimes we will get to that doomed enemy before this tracker wears out, and then we're kind of just wasting attacks on him or a turn on him. But you could also use this on an enemy that's chasing you. Maybe you just ignore him and you run away from him, you go fight other things, and then slowly over time, he eventually dies from this. So this is really good because it's an instant kill on an enemy once, of course, the 3 charges fill up. But the top of this one, allowing you to play 2 Dooms, is really the star of the show with this card. And then the other one is Wild Command here. This allows an adjacent summoned ally to perform move and attack +0 with you controlling the action. And then the bottom is a move 3, attack 2. You target a doomed enemy at any range. So attack 2 wherever they are, doesn't matter how far away they are, that's pretty cool. But the top of this is only really applies if you're using summons. So I would go with Inescapable Fate on this one. Probably mostly for the top, but the bottom of that one, that Doom can come in handy too, because you could use that early on and then use Inescapable Fate later on. So we'll take that one, and we are going to trade out Rain of Arrows to put that one in, and we'll move on to level 6. So at level 6, we've got Nature's Hunger and Camouflage. Nature's Hunger is another summons, which I will say the advantage of this one is that this summon stuns, which is really powerful, but he only has 1 movement, which means he ain't going to keep up. He's going to just get in the way and then sit in the back and do nothing. So unfortunately, he's not as useful as you first might think with that stun. If he had move 2, I'd say this would actually be a summons I might actually take, because he would be stunning things and then they wouldn't be able to attack him. He would last longer. And then the bottom of this one is another Doom. When this enemy dies, you and all allies perform heal 2 self-action. This one's a lot more useful than the other one, just healing ourselves. This one will actually heal our allies for 2 every time this enemy dies. So that could be useful if our allies are taking a lot of hits and need the extra health. And then the other card is Camouflage, attack 3, range 5, invisible, or bottom, move 3, invisible. I really like Camouflage here because, again, it gives us another attack, which we don't have a lot of and we need more of. And also goes invisible, which is going to help us to be able to move up safely and not worry about being attacked that turn that we move up. So of these 2, I think I'm actually going to go for the Camouflage. And then we'll take out Foot Snare to put Camouflage in. And then we'll move on to level 7 with Impending End or Crashing Wave. So Impending End is an attack 4, range 4. You kill the target and gain 1 XP if its hit point value is less than or equal to 2 after the attack. So this essentially is, say an enemy has 6 health, it kind of becomes an attack 6 because it'll kill them if they have less than 2 when it's done. So it's kind of interesting. It's still an attack 4, range 4, which is good. And then it just gives you the bonus that if they happen to almost be dead, it'll go ahead and finish them off, saving someone else an extra turn. So it's not a bad attack, actually. And then the bottom allows you to add +3 to all your attacks targeting doomed enemies for the round. Which, again, that could also be really powerful if you're using a multi-attack or a high damage attack on a single enemy. And then the other one, Crashing Wave, move 3, attack 3, and you target all adjacent enemies. You gain 1 XP for each enemy targeted. This is a burn, though. Moving 4 and attacking 3 on everything, I mean, it's not really that good, and it's going to put you up in an area where you're going to take hits, probably. The bottom of this one is a Doom, where you and all allies apply Curse on all your attacks targeting this enemy. So that one actually is pretty useful. It could be pretty useful because every time you attack that enemy, you're going to be throwing curses into their deck, which makes them do less damage to you. So not necessarily a bad card, although I'm going to go with the Impending End here, just because, again, I like to have the other attacks. I like to be able to actually attack with my Doomstalker. So we're going to take that one, and then we're going to take out Multi-Pronged Assault, put that one in, and then we'll go ahead and move on to level 8. And we'll find Rising Momentum or Feral Instincts. So Rising Momentum, attack 6, range 5, and push 3, but it burns. And then the bottom is a Doom. If this enemy dies within range 2 of another enemy, transfer this and any other Doom effects to that enemy instead of discarding them. So this kind of allows us to do what the other card did, except in this case, it's a Doom, which means it's reusable instead of being a burn. So Frightening Curse was the one that allowed us to transfer the Doom within range 2, but only 1 Doom. So when we're using 2 Dooms, we won't be able to transfer both of them. This card will allow us to transfer both of them, but one of them will, of course, have to be this one. So it's not necessarily better or worse. They both have their advantages. The advantage of this one being that it won't go away. You know, you get it back on a rest. And then the other card, Feral Instincts, is a move 2, attack 3, and loot 1, or the bottom, move 3 and heal 4. Either way, if you take Rising Momentum, I'd probably take Frightening Curse out and just use that Doom instead. Or you could take Feral Instincts and you could trade out a Moment's Peace because it's a move 2 heal 2 and this is a move 3 heal 4. So you could go either way here. I'm going to say we go Rising Momentum because that's a decent, strong attack if you power it up on top as well. And then we'll take out Frightening Curse, of course, to replace that one. And then we'll finally move on to level 9, where we'll find Predator and Prey, or Lead or Led to the Slaughter. Lead to Slaughter. Alright, so Predator and Prey summons Spitting Cobra. Now, as summons go, this one's actually pretty decent because it has 3 movement, it has 3 attack, and it has 3 range. Health 5 at level 9, it's probably going to die if it takes a hit, but the fact that it's ranged means it won't be on the front lines. Your allies will probably be taking the hits instead of this guy, plus he poisons. So this is actually a pretty strong summons. And then the bottom is a Doom where you and all allies add plus X attack to all of your attacks targeting the enemy, where X is the difference between the range of the attack and the number of hexes to the enemy. So, a long drawn out way to say, basically, if you have an attack range 5, but you only attack from range 2, you're going to get 3 extra attack on the attack to that doomed enemy. So if you have a lot of ranged characters, that Doom could actually be really powerful, but if you don't, like melee characters aren't really getting much of a bonus out of this, so it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And then the other one, Lead to Slaughter, attack 4, range 6, you force the target to move up to 3 hexes directly toward the closest hex adjacent to one of its enemies. So that's a nice little attack to hit them for 4 and then draw them right up to your tank or something to finish them off. And then the bottom is a move 3. You get to transfer all active Doom effects from their current target to one enemy within range 4 of you. So this is really good for, again, another way to keep Dooms out there without having to discard them. And it allows you to move it when you want to move it, not having to wait for the enemy to actually die. So out of these two, like I said, it's a really good summons if you want to go that route. I'm going to go Lead to Slaughter, mostly for that bottom where it's going to allow me to transfer Dooms. So we'll take that one, and we'll take out Fresh Kill to add that one in. So here we go with our level 9, and there are so many different ways you could do the Doomstalker based on the Dooms, and some of the Dooms work well together, some don't. So there's definitely some options out there for doing the 2 Dooms. It's useful sometimes, it's not useful others, but the bottom of this one is always useful for that big, heavy elite in the background. And then now we have a decent amount of attacks as well with our Doomstalker, so we can attack from range. So Doomstalker's a decent class, and he can be a lot of fun with his Dooms giving support to the team. Alright, so let's go ahead and move on and talk about some items for him. So first off, for head items, since he is a ranged character and he's got a lot of burns that are really powerful, I would go with Eagle Eye Goggles to boost up those burns, make sure we don't miss with them. Or you could go Empowering Talisman to make sure you can get your stamina potions back and get things like Dooms back. Instead of having to, you'd have to discard them, you could get them back and go ahead and reuse them. So those are my main suggestions for head items. For the body items, you definitely want to go just something armor for survivability if you do take hits. So maybe like your leather armor, or a Cloak of Invisibility could be good, or even a Flea Bitten Shawl if you have the expansion to, give you initiative of 99 for purposes of focusing all the time, so enemies will mostly ignore you. So any of those things could be good for the body items. And then for hand items, since we're ranged, I would really go with something like the Piercing Bow to ignore shield values, or even like the Throwing Hammer to stun. Anything that goes well with a range attack, the Unstable Explosives, Volatile Bomb, anything that pairs with a range attack would be really good for the Doomstalker. And then feat items, definitely want to go with like Boots of Striding and their various upgrades to give you that nice boost, that burst of movement when you need it to catch up, and then you'll be sitting there again, dooming things, shooting things from range. You are almost like a turret when you're the Doomstalker. You take a spot, you stay there, and you shoot things until you're out of cards, and then you move up and you repeat. And then finally, for our hand items, or our small items rather, I would definitely go a Major Power Potion, because some of our multi-attacks could get a big benefit out of this, or even some of our single attacks combined with our Eagle Eye Goggles and Advantage. This could be really powerful. And then of course our Stamina Potions, we definitely want those just to get our Dooms back faster. And then after that, a Healing Potion maybe if you think you need it. And that about covers the item. So let's go ahead and look at his perks then. So starting off, we can ignore negative scenario effects, so we always want to take that one as soon as we can. And then we're going to remove our -1s as usual. So -1's out, -1's out. We're down to only 1. And then that's as far as we can go. We can't remove any other negatives. So we can look at replacing 0s with +1s, which that'll be really powerful because we're going to get rid of all of our 0s and change them into +1s. So almost every time we attack, we should be getting a +1 card, at least at this point. And then we'll go ahead and add in these +2. So there's a +2 muddle card. We'll add that in. And then we got more +1s we can add with +1 poison, +1 wound, +1 immobilize, and there's a +0 stun card. And then add in our rolling 1s, and finally our rolling add target. And there we have our Doomstalker's perks all maxed out. So a lot of +1s here, a lot of +1s. You can expect most of the time to be doing at least 1 more damage than whatever your card says. So with all that said, let's just review real quick about the Doomstalker. So Doomstalker, again, he is a very stationary class. He wants to shoot things from range, and he wants to doom things. And those dooms have a lot of different uses, and I'd encourage you to experiment and play them in different ways. I am not a professional Doomstalker player. He's not really one of my favorite classes, but he can be really good in an effective player's hands, and a very good support player too, by putting those dooms out there, weakening enemies, killing them slowly in the background. So if you like a ranged build, you like the idea of those dooms, definitely give them a try. But with all that said, remember to like, subscribe, all that YouTube stuff if you enjoyed this video, and thank you so much for watching. Have a great day, and keep on gaming.